Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this edition of Meet America. I'm Annie Griffin, your host. And first of all, I want to thank all of you out there who saved our wild and our domestic horses from slaughter for another year. Now, in the appropriations bill, the appropriations conference that went on discussing this year's coming budget, there was some very ruthless Congress members who wanted to reinstate horse slaughter. Luckily, the senators voted against it. And as a result, we have stopped horse slaughter in this country for another year. In other words, no tax dollars can go to inspect horse meat. And that was due to all of you out there calling your Congress members and your senators and saying, don't you dare spend my tax dollars on such a diabolical, obscene, evil industry as slaughtering the very animal that we wrote history upon, that brought us to where we are today, who is a companion animal, who fed us by plowing our fields for us, who fought in our wars, who is the most amazing, intelligent, wonderful family being that I know. So, but we still have a lot of work to do. So first of all, I do want to thank Congressman Panetta. Our congressman here in Monterey helped to stop horse slaughter. He joined on letters of other Congress members to make sure that there wasn't enough money in the 2018 budget to allow for horse meat inspectors. And it's these kind of people we need to support. These are the Congress members that voted for horse slaughter in the appropriations. These are the members of Congress who, in my opinion, aren't fit to represent the American people. 80% of the American people do not want horse slaughter, and they don't eat horse meat. Horse meat is very, very unhealthy because of all the drugs horses are given. It's a very cruel industry. There's no kind way to kill a horse in a slaughter plant. So in my opinion, I hope these people meet their karma and they are not reelected. This is the Stony Cabin Valley Horse Herd Management Area in Battle Mountain, Nevada. And you're looking at some of your wild horses. Now, I'm looking for trampled bushes, folks, because that's one of the things the ranchers are saying, that the horses trample the bushes, but I can't see any. I'm really looking hard. I see a footprint here, right here, but it just missed this little bush here. This bush is intact. All these bushes are intact. If you get my meaning, if you get my drift. Again, here's a hoof print, but it's not on the vegetation itself. Here's another hoof print, but it's not on the vegetation, is it? And all around are hoof prints, but they're not on the vegetation. Do you see what I'm trying? So my point here is not only are they not on the vegetation, and we looked everywhere. We went all over the place looking for at least one bush that was trampled because these horses were going to be removed in a few days and have been removed. But anyway, their imprints, when rain comes, it holds the water and waters those plants. That's the ecology of these horses. But does BLM mention that? Do the ranchers mention that? No. Now cattle, they just step on the bush. Don't ask me why, but that's what they do. The second thing that horses do, and Craig Downer is going to talk to us about this in a moment, is their manure reseeds because they don't have a really good digestive system. So they don't destroy the seeds that they eat, and so thus they replant what they eat, which is so important to revitalize the soil. The big lie that they're destroying the environment, they're trampling down vegetation. Well, I point out to you all these footprints and all these bushes around intact. We are gathering evidence to see whether or what they're saying is true. And this is one of the big factors, isn't it? Isn't that what the cattle ranchers are saying, Craig? So I have on the phone with me now, folks, Craig Downer. He's a wildlife ecologist. And he was out with me on that day that we filmed Stony Mountain and watched with awe and admiration how the wild horses do not step on the bush, and what a miracle that was, because BLM was rounding up those wild horses on the pretense that that's why they had to do it. And the reason I'm mentioning this, and Craig's on the phone, is that Marie Cantwell is saying, going along with BLM, because she's not interested in seeing apparently any other information but what BLM supplies her with. So she's going along with BLM's premise that these wild horses are destroying the environment. Now, Craig, would you please tell me, have you gotten any response from Marie Cantwell yet? No,
I called and sent email and sent information, but I haven't received. I did talk a little bit to an aide and said that my input would be considered, though.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
In all fairness, yes, I did receive some sort of a response, but nothing really committal, mm-hmm. showing genuine interest, more like perfunctory.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's her number, folks. That's Senator Marie Cantwell's number, and it's going to be up to you once again. Believe me, all of you people calling, those that watch this show and called your Congress members, those that just heard it through the grapevine or looked on the internet or whatever, we have been able to stop horse slaughter for another year. So, Craig, would you speak about how important it is that this senator starts paying attention to us and why? What is secretly happening to our wild horses? Are they being slaughtered on the sly? Do we know about it? What is the problem here?
Yes, this is one of the very most corrupt government programs and general corrupt aspects of this society that is trying to monopolize the public lands and its resources, and disobeying the law and disobeying what is healthy for everyone, physically and spiritually. This is a quality of life issue, and it's the general public wants to see the wild horses and burros treated fairly. They're supposed to, according to the law.
Isn't it? Isn't that what the cattle ranchers are saying, Craig?
They'll often say that they.
I can't hear you, Craig. Can you say?
They destroy the vegetation, pull the grass up by the roots, but it's actually cattle and sheep that do that with their tongues.
Oh.
Because they don't have upper incisors.
Okay, but
rarely will a horse do that.
But I'm talking about trampling the bush right now. Do you see any trampled? I need a wildlife ecologist to verify that what I'm saying is true here, even though I have visual? Do you see any, maybe you can point
There
out some.
are times when they will paw at bushes to get grass,
Right,
and when there's snow also, they'll paw through the
right.
snow or
But
break
here,
the ice.
do you see trampled? I always see a footprint here. I don't see a
No,
footprint here.
they tend to step around the bushes in general.
Okay, so there we have a wildlife ecologist verifying what you and I are seeing here. There again, a footprint there, but not on the bush. So another example, folks. Now here's an area heavily trotted by a little foal and its mother, but not on the bush. Why isn't it being trampled here? Why didn't they just carelessly step here? Because horses are ecologists. They were born into nature to be so.
It's not the horses who destroy, they restore. The ones who are destroying are us people. We're destroying by upsetting the apple cart of nature and how all the species fit together, including the predators. And I wanted to say the predators aren't the only control. The horses can control their own numbers and do so once they feel their niche. That's why they're called climax species, and I learned this as an ecologist. As they fill their niche, they don't reproduce as much, and they balance out, but you have to let the mature social units evolve. That's the bands with the mature stallions and mares. It's a wonderfully wise system, and these animals haven't been on the earth for all these thousands, even millions of years, deeply rooted without knowing how to live harmoniously with the ecosystem. And they're wonderful examples. We should be learning from them. And since they're not ruminants, like the cud-chewing multi-stomach pregastric digesters, they are much needed to balance out these cattle, sheep, deer, elk, moose, the goats, whatever, that are that thoroughly digest their food and consequently leave very little in their droppings that helps replenish soils, the humus. The horse and the burro do they replenish the humus because they don't as thoroughly degrade what they eat, and then when it passes out, it feeds the ecosystem, and it builds a richer soil. It also feeds little insects on up the food chain, birds, lizards, rodents, all on up. Why do they ignore this? This is a plain fact. It's abundantly proven. It's been known forever by anyone who just looks at it honestly, and they seed so many more plants, and that's why in societies where the horses are valued honestly, they actually recognize that they restore degraded ecosystems, and that's happening like in places like Romania and parts of England and France and Russia. They recognize that they're restorers. So we've got to wake up. America's got to wake up. The horse, the wild horse, is going back to its true nature in nature. And to say that they're not wild is just a bald-faced lie. So why this Senator Marie Cantwell doesn't take an interest, I think it's deplorable. It just means she doesn't care and she doesn't respect us.
No, she doesn't.
Who have bothered to learn.
That's right.
And who really appreciate the beautiful horses
Right.
and their place in America.
You know, and another thing is we're showing some manure on the screen right now, horse manure, and how it breaks down and, replenishes and adds to the topsoil. But you're absolutely right. There is no respect from this woman, as far as I can see, concerning our wildlife. And the wildlife in America is what makes America great and interesting. And when you travel across this great country of ours, it's just empty. You know, it's empty where it could be filled with horses, it could be filled with burros, it could be filled with wildlife and buffalo and antelope, and you just don't see any. It's all been taken away. And we need to restore that. And Marie Cantwell has placed such a hand in this, and yet she turns away her head. So if people start calling and getting her to realize that we care and she needs to care, maybe we can finally get a response that I can then report to my listeners, hey, we're getting somewhere, you know?
Yeah, and I know there's many in Washington who do care, and they need to really insist that they be listened to and not treated like imbeciles that,
Right.
that don't know anything. That's just insulting.
Yeah, it
So
is.
I do encourage you to call your senator and you know, make her listen. And don't be brushed off.
Right.
You know, Washington State should have had legal herds on the BLM and the Forest Service lands, but because of dishonesty and breaking criminality and ignoring what the law really said, there are now no legal herd management areas or territories that which, well, there are legal ones, but I mean they've been ignored, so they're treated as though they don't exist by the BLM and the Forest Service, and that was just a gross and outrageous act of sabotage of the true intent of the wild
And that
free-roaming
comes from the cattle industry. That cattle's from the
so
livestock.
much does, and the sheep industry and other, but mainly it's the public lands ranchers. You're right, Lorna.
Yeah.
Or Annie.
Yeah. So the important thing people can do is, in Washington, there's a lot of wonderful ranchers that are literally growing their beef on private land. And you can Google them in your area and find out who they are and ask where they sell their meat and buy from them. Buy from the ranchers that are not exploiting our public lands and taking away our horses. And unfortunately, Washington is a big horse slaughter, pro-horse slaughter state. And there's a lot of ranchers that just raise horses to send them to slaughter, and they definitely lobby Marie Cantwell, and she listens to them, obviously, because she certainly doesn't listen to the thousands of people in Washington that have horses and don't want their horses to go to slaughter. And they've, you know, she's been called on that. So hopefully this show and the information will get out to all you folks, and you'll continue doing the great thing and saving our horses. So thank you so much, Craig, for being on our show and educating the public.
My pleasure. I always like to stand up for the wonderful horses.
All right. Thank you so much, Craig, for all you're doing. We might want to mention here what we're saying to Marie Cantwell, what we would like to have her do, and what would that be?
Oh, she should back the SAFE bill to prevent the transportation of horses for slaughter over into Mexico and Canada.
Now, in the past, I have to say this, in the past, and I don't know if she has recently, but in the past, she did make sure that there was no money to inspect horse meat.
Oh, good, yes. Yeah. And also, she should stop this proposal by Chris Stewart, which has been stopped at least for half a year now, to allow the government to sell to kill buyers all the so-called excess horses, which aren't excess. They're actually just barely they're not even minimally viable out on the public land. So that's another lie. She should make sure that they restore horses, restore them to truly genetically viable numbers out on their legal lands. And she should be part of a proposal to have a Restore Our American Mustangs Act passed, like Raul Grijalva, the representative, had proposed back in 2009 and was passed by the House of Representatives, but then blocked by the Resource Committee in the Senate. That should be revised.
That's her committee.
Yeah, so she's in a position to do a lot, and and make sure that they're treated rightly. Now they're very much needed today because they greatly prevent catastrophic wildfires, because their digestive system enables them to digest coarser, drier, more flammable vegetation, and also their great mobility gets them into remoter areas where often the cattle and sheep don't go, and where often these catastrophic wildfires start. So they're actually they save billions of dollars if they're allowed to fill their niche. And also, when they build the soils up, the soils become more moist and and dampen down lightning strikes and fires like from campfire sparks or catalytic converters that strike on rocks, on jeepers that go out, things like that. That's really major, and they're just wonderful presences. And these are highly evolved animals. They're very sensitive and intelligent, very attuned. They're like an ancient presence that has just attuned themselves very finely, and they have an affinity for man. So we've got to learn to share this earth and let them have their degree of freedom in nature wherein to fulfill their wonderful destiny. And don't forget about my book, The Wild Horse Conspiracy. You can get it either on Amazon, also as an ebook, or through my website, thewildhorseconspiracy.org. And I'll be posting a lengthy study that was based on mainly work I did all last year in 5 herd areas. That'll be out tomorrow, and it's about 100 pages. So that's what they should read, and be sure and send that to the senator.
Well, you just need a summary, but we want to thank you so much for everything you've done for the wild horses, Craig, and the American people. I believe in them. I believe in you out there, because we've been able to stop horse slaughter for another year, and there was terrific pressure to reinstate horse slaughter here, and you stopped them. So thank you.
Yeah, and another thing is they wanted to just go out and say, oh, they're over the appropriate management level, let's just go out and shoot them. Yeah. I mean, that is so abominable. Yeah. And, it just shows utterly no regard, a very crude, base mentality. We can't allow that to prevail. Americans are better than that.
I believe so. Like you said, it's, there's this mentality, oh, go out and kill, oh, go out and fish, go out and shoot, go out, especially in Washington. All these men and women that just love to kill, kill deer, kill quail, kill this, kill that, and it's all about...
I guess they think they're building up their ego or something by killing a poor, defenseless, innocent animal. I think it's disgusting.
Yeah. Why don't you shoot yourself in a...
Horse has done so much for mankind.
Yeah.
And then is highly evolved, sensitive, depends, often forgives and forgets, and is loyal and compassionate and healing. And to treat the horse that way, to me, that is just, whoever's doing that is accruing a terrible burden, that he or she will have to to pay.
Well, I really believe, thank you so much, Craig Downer, for all your hard work in protecting our wildlife. Okay. Okay, thanks a lot. Bye. Well, so there's the number, and I hope that eventually this woman will respond to the truth of the matter and help us all out here who love our wildlife, love our wild horses, want to see them by the thousands racing across our wild and beautiful plains, because that's what makes America great and beautiful. And that's what brings tourists from other countries wanting to come and see what Old West is all about. So Maria Cantwell, please get to us and listen to us, not just the ranchers, not just the ones who want to utilize this land for their own selfish means, but for all of us. Thanks for watching. Now, this is from Animal Angels. It's not gruesome, but it's proof that our wild horses are going to Mexico, and the records are being questioned by Animal Angels because they just don't seem to make sense. And the investigation is ongoing. And this is why it's so urgent to call Senator Marie Cantwell, because in the Office of Inspector General's report, it states that they suspect thousands more of our wild horses and burros have gone to slaughter. And we suspect right now thousands are being sent to slaughter. It's a huge business. They get $1,500 per horse, and it goes to the private buyers and all that. And so more than ever, she needs to respond. And instead, she ignores. So let's watch this from the Animal Angels. Thanks for watching. It says the unloading of BLM branded horses, that means BLM has brands on all the wild horses that they capture, at the Intermeats horse slaughter plant in Mexico. And it's BLM horses unloading at a Mexican slaughter plant. So these are BLM horses. Senator Marie Cantwell can stop this, and she's ignoring it. Okay, here it says, investigators followed a truck loaded with U.S. slaughter horses from the Presidio export pens to the plant. While documenting the unloading, they noticed several horses with a BLM freeze mark. Now, BLM states, oh, well, you know, we sell these horses to bona fide buyers that buy a BLM horse, but then they might keep that horse a year or two, and then they send them to auction, and then that's how they get sent to slaughter. And that is true. But BLM can send thousands of these horses, give them, like to Tom Davis, the know and kill buyer, they sold 1,700 wild horses to him at $10 a head. Now, you and I can only buy at the most 4, and the BLM will come and investigate your property and make sure that the horses have a good place to stay and they're going to be cared for. But they didn't do that with Tom Davis. So that's our problem here, and this is what Marie Cantwell should be looking into, is where are these horses going to be going? And she ignores, totally ignores this issue. While documenting the unloading, they noticed several horses with a BLM freeze mark. Nothing on the owner-shipper's paperwork obtained by Animal Angels for the transport indicated the presence of these horses. In other words, there was no indication that these horses came from BLM. There is a strong evidence that this shipper falsified multiple documents regarding sex, breed, and age of the horses in shipment. I hope you'll support Animal Angels. They're a great group. And they need your money because they go down to Mexico and they literally film what's going on. So our beautiful wild horses, the Office of Inspector General mentioned in his report that he suspected thousands more going to slaughter just in this way, this venue. We cannot trust the corrupt agency, BLM, anymore, no matter what they say. They are run by ranchers who have an interest in their land and have taken over their lands. And you are seeing everything that's great about America being sent to slaughter. And if we don't stick up for ourselves and what we believe in and what's right, we lose respect. And as you can see here, senators like Marie Cantwell with all this power ignore us and don't have any respect at all for us. Officials have been informed about this transport and the investigation is ongoing. Please contact Senator Marie Cantwell now. Let her know you saw this show. Let her know that if she wants your vote, she better start protecting our wildlife. She better stand up for what's great in America. All right. Our next portion of this program is going to be on animal testing alternatives. So thanks for watching and getting educated and helping the animals.
And I will say that people have worked very hard to make the treatment of animals more ethical. And again, where that line is drawn in the sand, I think it's very difficult. We do have Kathy Guillermo here. She's the Vice President of Lab Investigations for PETA, which stands for People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals. Her organization believes all animal testing should be banned. Kathy, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
This
It's
morning.
a pleasure to be here.
So, Kathy, obviously, as physicians, I recall my first ever procedure doing a cricothyrotomy. You know,
On a dog?
it was on a dog that had been
Fully anesthetized.
fully anesthetized, and all I kept thinking is, I hate that I have to do this, but at the same time, I wouldn't want the first time I ever do this to be on your child. I can't tell you how much as physicians we hate the fact that there is animal testing. But Kathy, and I applaud you because I think that you have done a great job of bringing this to the forefront. But you say absolutely no testing whatsoever on animals for anything?
Well, I'm happy to tell you that if you were going to medical school today, you would not have to do any of those procedures on animals. Most experimentation on animals has nothing to do with disease research. It's basic R&D, it's product testing. And so, yes, we advocate the best kind of research, the kind that helps people without harming other beings.
But you know, certain disease processes treated with vaccines, polio vaccines, smallpox vaccines, that wouldn't have happened without the use of trying them first in animals.
And back in the day when
millions of lives were saved because of that.
Yeah, you know, thousands and millions of kids were dying of these illnesses every year. And thanks to animal testing, it helped us develop these technologies. It's so different using a few cells in a test tube versus a live animal. You know, it's just different.
And Kathy, I want to get your perspective on this
Animal.
because I think everyone here agrees that the ethical treatment of animals is absolutely necessary. But one of your stances, which I absolutely agree with, is that 9 out of 10 failure rate in testing drugs in animals.
That's right.
But what if it was a 9 out of 10 failure rate on humans? That's
Well,
where. So what is the alternative? I guess
It
I'm
actually is a
asking
50% failure rate on humans. And we know from information just released by Dr. Francis Collins, head of the Human Genome Project, that 50% of drugs that test safe in animals are actually toxic to humans. So that asks the question, what are we missing? What is being tested in an animal? It doesn't work, it's thrown out. And might work in a human being. We're so different physiologically, even though we share this capacity for suffering.
But what do you do? What is the solution if you say absolutely no testing whatsoever? The first test is going to be on humans.
Well, no, it's not. We are in an exciting new era of non-animal testing methods. And there are, for example, breast cancer research now involves very sophisticated 3D tissue construct models. And that's human tissue, human breast cancer tissue that we can work with. Drug development is very exciting because there are now computer chips that actually mimic the drug going through the system from the liver through the entire human system. We know how a human will react.
So I think the beauty here is the more technology that's in place where we can use it, that's a good thing. That's a good thing for everyone. And I'm sitting here struggling in my own mind where you draw the line, because I still feel like there are probably some unique circumstances where I could see it justified. But I do understand your perspective, and I think that you have done a great job of pushing for animal rights, and I think that the medical community, in my experience, has started to respond. So we applaud you and thank you for what you're doing.
And so, another reason that animal research is still so prevalent is because there's so much money involved. And the researchers get lots of money. I heard recently that there was an experiment on a salamander. The researcher took out its brain and basically put it in a blender, scrambled it all up, and then reintroduced it into the cavity of the salamander, and it grew a new brain. So this kind of research, this is just so diabolical. I don't think it's worth what it got out of it. I think that we just have to say, is it worth the price of our souls? Because whether we want to believe it or not, there is a spiritual side to our lives. And the further and further away we get from it and just look at science, the more robotic we get, the more technology we get. But we miss the larger picture, which is the beautiful spiritual side of life. Its magical side, its synchronicity side. It's the side we can't explain, the unknown and the unknowable. But the more that you come in contact with that side, the more it draws itself to you. And that's what I call the soul, our contact, our oneness with the great infinite creation. And when you start speaking to the great infinite creation, which I call God, but you may have it by any other name, and if you're a scientist, you might well call it the infinite creation, because we cannot deny that there is a creation out there, and it is of an incredible intelligence. And I believe that the intelligence and the awareness comes from the subatomic levels. Otherwise, how would any of us be able to be created? If there is no intelligence from that level, how could it atomically create what it has created? And having said that, all of us have been brought up knowing good from evil. And when we start allowing ourselves to go to the dark side, we lose our souls, and we lose in touchness with that vast, incredible, magical side that we need to cultivate. Thanks for watching. And now let's take a look at what's happening with our chemtrails. For those of you who don't know what chemical trails are, they're those white streaks you see in the sky, geoengineering of our atmosphere that's changing the pH of our soils and destroying our immune systems. And there's many, many valiant, wonderful people working to try to get the attention of our Congress members and senators to stop this program. So let's take a look at what's going on. Thanks for watching.
One Northern California City Council is taking a stand against mind control weapons that are used against its residents, with a city ordinance banning them. The Richmond City Council has officially banned space-based weapons in its own city limits. This is after the council received complaints that citizens suffered from chemtrails, particle beams, and electromagnetic radiation. It adopted a resolution called the Space Preservation Treaty. No word yet on how they plan on enforcing this ban. You know, Madison, leave it to the watchful eye of the Richmond City Council to come up with something like this, vote on it, and then enforce it.
I think it's fantastic that they're able to enforce this, because let's go back. This is a controversial debate about chemtrails, but they're saying it's a water vapor, but if it is a biological toxin. And if these things are true, that they are, what are they doing to human beings? Are they, it begs the question, is it mind control, or could it be health concerns? So I think it's great that they are banning them if they do exist.
Right,
which is up for debate.
That is the conspiracy theory on the table. And these chemtrails, the assertion is that the government is intentionally using these aircraft for chemical and biological agents. They're spraying them, in theory, for sinister purposes to make us all dumb and compliant. And if they do exist, the Richmond City Council is on it, and they're going to make sure that it doesn't happen. My question is, how are they planning on enforcing this? I mean...
Yeah, and the question is, it's kind of scary to know that our government is perhaps mind control and spraying a chemical that is hindering our abilities to be better human beings. I mean, on a health concern, and even on our mind control, meaning does that affect the way we're thinking? And so but all these questions come up, and the fact that Richmond has been able to ban it, it does beg the question is, when they see one of these airplanes, are they going to bring it down and ask, is it water vapor or is it chemicals?
I mean, that's an excellent question. I just love that they're saying, not up in here, not up in here. Well, we'd certainly love to know what you think about chemtrails, the city of Richmond, and their council decision. Please be sure, log on, post your comments below. I look forward to reading them. While you're at it, subscribe to the Lip TV too.
Strange things in the sky are pretty much an everyday occurrence here in Nevada. Right now, our skies are buzzing with aircraft flying in red flag exercises, and who knows what they're testing up at Area 51.
But the object that recently appeared over a nearby town has people scratching their heads, wondering, what the heck was that?
Well, the person who photographed the object contacted who else? The I-Team's George Knapp.
It kind of looks like a cloud, but it's not a natural cloud anyway. You'll see why in just a few seconds. It's a white, fluffy formation that could have been emitted from the back of an aircraft, though not like any aircraft that's been made public. So what is it? And is it connected to all those other puffy lines we see in our skies?
Water? Yeah, they were just out over here, about halfway across the pond.
On a clear day back in December, Alamo resident and amateur photographer Malcolm Harris stopped to capture images of ducks sitting in water just off Highway 93. He spotted something else in the sky above the field.
It was long, puffs of smoke, it looked like a rope. It kind of like there was a solid rope on the top, and then little puffs of smoke underneath it, and they were quite tight. I'd definitely say it was man-made. It wasn't anything natural.
This is what he photographed. Harris, the son of a longtime Las Vegas newsman, ran some calculations based on his lens angle and estimates the odd cloud was about a mile distant and perhaps 500 yards long. But it was dense, like puffs of smoke that had been crammed together.
You could see where it began and where it ended, and there was nothing on either end. It was very clean. It stood by itself. There wasn't anything else around it. I've seen clouds being made out here in the desert. You see, all of a sudden you'll see a cloud being made, and that's not what was going on.
He didn't hear anything, so whatever formed the cloud was quiet. Alamo is buzzed almost daily by warplanes from nearby Nellis Air Base. Residents also know that on the other side of the mountains is the most famous secret base in the world, Area 51, where the government tests the most advanced otherworldly technology in its arsenal.
When you say what's out there, you mean right out there?
Where?
Well, yeah, right.
Yeah.
Right.
Harris's photo is similar to exhaust patterns spotted a few times since the 90s, the so-called donuts on a rope, which set the aviation world on fire. Since the 80s, there's been speculation about something called Project Aurora, a family of super-secret delta-shaped craft that may use a pulse detonation engine, a system that could produce donuts on a rope exhaust patterns. Bill Sweetman, one of the most respected aviation writers in the world, thinks Aurora is real. He uncovered what appears to be a paper trail in the black budget that funneled billions of dollars to Aurora, or something like it. But what does Sweetman think about this photo? If they're donuts, they sure are crammed together. After talking to defense industry colleagues, Sweetman suggested the cloud may have been created by using advanced pyrotechnics, in essence, flares that are used by fast jets as countermeasures to confuse an enemy. But another senior aviation writer and test pilot, Bill Scott, disagrees. Scott told us that flares don't lay horizontally, as this one does. He does not think it's a contrail, more like a plume. But after asking around, Scott and the colleagues he consulted say they have no idea what made it. Best guess, an unknown dispensary of some sort. Mal Harris is likewise skeptical that it was caused by flares.
They don't go in a straight line. You could definitely tell that had some sort of propulsion behind it.
Cloud-like formations, presumably contrails, are a hot topic online. An entire genre of conspiracy theories has evolved over the past decade or so. The so-called chemtrails. The internet is filled with chemtrail sites which allege that the checkerboard patterns in the skies are part of a global plot to spray something into the atmosphere. AboveTopSecret.com gets up to 4 million visits per month, and its 300,000 members have thoroughly digested the chemtrail storyline.
Chemtrails, contrails, chemtrails. If you do a cursory look at the site, you'll see there are thousands of pages of discussion dedicated to chemtrails/contrails.
Millions of people are watching the skies to look for evidence of what they think is a global conspiracy, a massive spraying operation carried out by persons unknown for reasons that are not clear. The I-Team first dug into this topic more than 12 years ago, and we can tell you for a certainty that an awful lot of stuff really is being sprayed up there in the sky. Global conspiracy? That's not so clear. Tonight at 6 o'clock, we jump into the thick of the chemtrail versus contrail controversy.
Well, interesting stuff. Thanks, George.
From 8. This is Luke Radowski of WeAreChange.org, and I'm here with Kristen Megan, who's actually a U.S. military whistleblower. She has an amazing, fascinating story that we will share with you here today. Now, Kristen, can you tell us what branch of the military you were in and what you uncovered?
Sure. I was in the Air Force on active duty for 9 years, and I worked in bioenvironmental engineering.
And now, I know the issue came up with chemtrails. I know that's an extremely controversial issue. A lot of people are extremely divided on this issue, but you actually saw things from your experiences that kind of give it a little bit more validity than I actually saw ever before. Can you go into the details of exactly what you saw?
Yeah, basically, to summarize it, part of my job was to know everything that was going on in the military and what type of impact that might have on human health, and then the environmental aspects and impacts. What chemicals are we using? How are we disposing of it? Kind of cradle to grave. So we were the internal compliance people for following OSHA and EPA standards. One part of that process was to approve chemicals, hazardous materials. You know, what are you using? Why do you need it? Where's it being used? And tracking that disposal. After it being brought to my attention about chemtrails or geoengineering, I used to think it was crazy. It actually was disrespectful to my line of work, because here we are trying to prevent environmental aspects and impacts and not have anybody get sick from our operations. But in an attempt to debunk, it changed my life. I started noticing things. I started noticing large quantities on the system where I would approve chemicals that did not have a manufacturer name, wasn't tied to a building, and that was normal protocol. When I started asking questions, I slowly became demonized. A couple years passed after that when I asked again and people realized I was kind of being more vocal about it on social media. I was starting to be thrown into a mental institution and have my daughter taken away. Wow. That changed my life. I no longer view the military the same way, and I feel like after 9 years of trying to uphold an oath, I'm able to do that now.
And so you uncovered a lot of these hidden chemicals. Where's the connection with the chemtrails?
Well, the connection is, at first, when I saw these large quantities of aluminum, barium, strontium oxides and sulfates, I thought, well, this could be for an industrialized process, for something called shot peening or, bead blasting, things that you see in kind of the automotive industry. Except those were already accounted for. I already knew how much was used for those processes. It was a little type of different constituent. And the first thing I did, part of my job was to sample air, soil, and water. So that's what I did. I air sampled the soil, the air, and the water. And due to my profession, I know at which levels or limits of detection you need to check that at. And the amount of pollution that was in my area, and this is tests I did in Oklahoma, you know, in Georgia, in Chicago where I'm now. But in taking those samples, I knew the background, because a lot of these things are naturally occurring and elemental, but not in this form and not in this quantity. So how did it get there?
So just to clarify, you see these huge storage containers of these chemicals. Then you do the test on the air and soil, and you see these same chemicals in the air and soil now. And that's pretty much been the main evidence I've seen people who are for chemtrails use, is saying, look at the soil, look at the water, look at all the chemicals in there. And now you're finally the person who's like, wait, I worked in the military, I saw a bunch of these chemicals there. That's crazy.
It is crazy. I used to think it was crazy, and everyone asks, why are there no pictures?
Yeah.
Well, I'd like to see you try to take a picture inside of a restricted air hangar, because you'll have an M16 in your back.
Yeah.
And the hardest part for people to realize is, you know, where are the pilots? Like, there's people who have come forward, but these people are scared. You look at what's happened to whistleblowers, look at Snowden, look at Manning. People are scared. And I think because this topic is already labeled a conspiracy theory, I don't think the government necessarily views me as a threat yet. And I mean, I know it's not the most safe thing to do, but it's the right thing to do.
It's laughed at. It's made obscure. But just to bring the point home, the question I have is, why are they even chemtrailing? Why is the military and government chemtrailing us? I don't know. What's your understanding of it?
Well, I don't have anything that can solidify, but I do have my opinions, and that is the history of weather weaponry. I mean, you can take away people's monetary system, you can take away people's rights, but you take their food and you disable their ecosystem, that's the #1 way to handicap people. And they've done it since the 40s. It's not new. Also seeing how it started out to be a government program, and then noticing that it is a way for private corporations to profit off this, whether it's controlling agriculture, you know, profiting. There's certain events, you know, you lose money on if it rains, or so knowing that you can kind of predict and control the weather, there's money there. I've also, you know, heard that it could be tied to Agenda 21, but for me, it's not about why. It's just stopping it. It needs to be stopped.
Yeah, and it's called the crazy-ass conspiracy theory. The Chinese are doing it now openly. They did it for the Olympics.
I mean, they've sprayed people. I'm sure you've heard the St. Louis story. They did biological testing. So if the government is capable of doing that, why is it so hard for people to believe? And I don't know if you've heard about David Keith, but he's actually a geoengineer, Canadian. He works at Harvard. He just wrote a new book on climate engineering. And in a
So you can see the rest of that interview on wearechange.org on YouTube. Hope you contact your Congress members and say you want to know what they're doing to stop this. It involves all of